Good morning. We're going to continue with my latest understanding of the grace of silence. I think probably a stumbling block for me, or maybe it simply wasn't the right time, the correct time for something to dawn on me, dawn in, awaken. What's it? Sorry, adjustments. Part of my process. Anyway, probably confused silence and silent. The being in silence. Instead of to be silent. And I thought about what would the opposite of silent be? Being very comfortable with it, absence, the opposite of silence being communication. How about silent? If I'm separating these states, there must be another polarity, another opposite. And indeed, noise and silent. So, silent is the absence of noise. And in most cases, we consider this external noise originating from without. And silence seems to be more about what's going on internally. And in this separation, in this division of what silent and silence mean to me, how I interpret them, has gone a long ways in this really recent process that I've been going through of sorting these things out. It seemed preordained somehow that I would share a process, that I would be able to capture the evolution of a process, an internal process, give it words and share. And that's what these last few days have definitely been. After a somewhat tumultuous day before yesterday, as often happens, yesterday became a much easier day. Had to deal with the aftermath of the day previous, but it really posed few obstacles. I kind of relaxed into normalcy. while recognizing that change, that events in my life had necessitated attention, effort, energies, reconciliation. All these were necessary. That valuable energy was expended. And this is how I'm able to use the energies that I'm blessed with. So the beauty of silence, the grace of being in a state of silence, is a beautiful thing. And it appears at this point that it's more accessible. It's quickly becoming resident within me. And I see that I will fall into this state more and more oftenly and more easily. Design is, the plan is, if there is a plan. Although I've lived by the caveat. The plan is, there is no plan. But this state of silence, this grace of silence, just sits so well with me. And just as equanimity is a constant companion, so it seems that silence is well on its way to accompanying equanimity. To be in a state of silence precludes being silent all the time. I've shared before, I've shared at least twice about taking a vow to be silent. I never took a vow of silence because I didn't understand at that point the difference that lie in between silent and silence. I just didn't know. It hadn't dawned on me. So now I know that a state of silence can be maintained even when you're not silent, even when you're making noise, even as your mind is doing its assigned tasks. And this assigning the mind tasks, giving it a job, employing it to its fullness is quite a rewarding experience. So to the random thoughts that fire like that fire so often in most of our minds just living here in Taiwan, I'm quite used to the sound of fireworks, and the mind, if not used properly, will be much like that, the sound of firecrackers. Random neurons just firing within that gray mass we call the brain. This is where taming comes in, taming the mind, giving it a purpose. And you will be really surprised as you learn to utilize your mind fully, because this is what I believe proper utilization of this gift of a mind is. Mindful means exactly this. Your mind is full of useful information. The idea of mindfulness being an empty mind is ironic if you look at the words themselves, the word itself, mindful. Why do we confuse this with mindless? Well, mindless could be exactly what an undirected mind is. A mind without a clear purpose. Sometimes we have to talk to our mind as we do a toddler and make it clear through repetition, through reward. Through consistency. These are what are effective means of dealing with not only toddlers, not only infants, not only young children, but your own mind, which in many aspects is not much different than a toddler. It needs to learn its boundaries. And these boundaries are best served by coming from a loving state, coming from calmness, and coming from example, being what you want others to be at all times with no exceptions, no time off. And remember, if you do fall into the trap, the sneaky ego, the emotions that disturb peace, like jealousy and anger and confusion, recognize it as quickly as you can, address it, accept it, and then the process of forgiveness. And this will become quicker and quicker, and need less and less of your attention, your energy to accomplish this. All these things become more and more obvious as you slip into the mantle of silence. As all things familiar, it feels comfortable. It offers comfort, slipping into this suit of silence is like visiting the childhood home, seeing old friends, putting on a favorite t-shirt, because the memory is attached. Well, so is silence. We come from a state of silence, and we're thrust into a world not prepared to reclaim our heritage of silence. We come into the world through noise, don't we? Most of the time through crying, objecting stringently to leaving the comforts of our mother's body to come into a cold, sterile world. A hospital, for most of us, can't be more cold and more sterile, more impersonal than a hospital. Bright lights, I hate them to this day. And interestingly, all we can make is noise. We're not making words, even though we learn quickly that noise will get the attention of mom or dad. Change me, feed me, hold me, clean me. We learn that making noise, not being silent, gets their attention. And then we get more sophisticated at this process as we learn through reward and punishment. Punishment being ignoring sounds that we make, appreciating, applauding certain sounds. Yay, mommy, daddy, yay, good baby. And ignoring goo goo, dada, goo goo, la la la, boo boo boo. Yeah. It's a process of elimination, looking for attention, looking for energy as we learn to make words and learn to communicate. Verbally, even though by this point we've gotten quite good at non-verbal communication. It's a process of becoming more sophisticated in our attention, connecting cause and effect. This is our growth pattern. And it seems to me that we can start understanding the state of silence as we become more efficient communicators. For a child to even be silent, however, is not an event that happens often. Mostly occurs in sleeping, the hours, the time spent sleeping, the rest of the time. Children are quite noisy, which again is part of their learning process. So it seemed to me that when I recognized what a slow learner that I was, that when I recognized that the reward of silence could be appreciated as early as 3, 4, or 5 years of life. And it took me till I sit here today at 70 when the light is finally coming on, when it really dawns to me about embracing the grace of silence. I've been a pretty noisy human being, and only now are fully appreciating the difference that I've always withdrawn into being silent, not making noise, not subjecting myself to the noise of our environment, at least artificial, man-made noise. Isn't it amazing that most times the sounds of nature are nurturing? The sounds of nature enhance. What's more beautiful than that first bird song that you hear in the morning? What's more beautiful as you hear the waves breaking on the seashore? What's more beautiful and comforting than the wind blowing through the leaves of a tree as you make the effort to climb a mountain? The stream gurgling past. Yet traffic. I find myself most susceptible. Early morning, the last thing I want to hear is an extraneous human voice. And when you add a human voice speaking a language that I'm not too familiar with, makes it even more grating. Early morning is the time that all folks are up. And all folks tend not to hear very well. So it seems that they speak at a louder volume. Even traffic means to me the coming and going, the breathing in and breathing out of civilization. And that's easier to deal with than somehow those voices early in the morning. And that says more about me. For many years, one sound of nature that I wasn't particularly enamored of, but seeing that no matter where I lived, I couldn't escape was the rooster greeting the sun. And sometimes they seemed so confused because there was no hint of the sun coming up anytime soon, but they're already making their noise. It's really interesting how I've learned to accept the rooster crowing as part of the ritual, of my ritual, of greeting the day in the same spirit that he's greeting the day, the same spirit that he's welcoming the sun. And I'm finding through time, patience, that even those human voices that were disturb the equilibrium of my morning become part of what's around me, just as natural as anything that nature gives us with. It's the nature of human beings to communicate, to reach out, to greet others, to get our slow to wake up children ready for school and into the car. Or mostly here, moms use scooters because the schools aren't close by. Get the kids shepherded down, get them in their helmet, get them on the scooter, get them off to school. And maybe mom can come home and take a breather, because part of the process is either making the breakfast for the children or stopping by in one of Taiwan's amazing breakfast stores. One of the joys of being here for me is enjoying breakfast stores that are ubiquitous and so reasonably priced. One business that never seems to close, that never seems to fail here in Taiwan is a breakfast place. And this is all part of what silence is gifting me with. Silence is only increasing my appreciation of the world around me. Silence has helped me to understand that even if my mind is not silent, if I haven't quieted, silenced it, that silence itself is large enough to embrace the well-used mind. It joins me in my appreciation of this tool that has carried me this far and will continue to be useful as the future unfolds. As one moment passes to another. and to truly understand being in the moment. And this too was grace to me through silence, through keeping in a state of silence. That the moment is all we have that has any relationship to the moment before or the moment to come. It's a continuity. It's that steps. It's that step that offers a resting place till the next step. Offers a respite from the previous step. This is what silence is. Silence is a companion. Silence. There I go, science in silence. I'll have to look at that. Silence accumulates. You can keep adding to silence. It's progressive, in other words. Whereas silent is about taking away noise. So you learn that being silent is not without its rewards, but like almost everything else, it's a stepping stone. And it's a stepping stone through expansion. Which sits so well with knowing that everything is in a state of constant expansion. And this is growth of a phase, a particular phase. Contraction will and does come, but only in the spirit of ending something so that something else can begin. Contraction leads to a new expression of expansion.